to just sit here and listen to the music because it's so great, Craig Saffin's score. So Nick, I want to ask you, you were just coming off Tag the Assassination Game, and it's so important for a director to pick the right second project because it can sort of cement their reputation or end a promising career. So there's a lot of stress in terms of choosing what the next project's going to be. How did you end up coming to The Last Starfighter? Sort of what was the calculus that went into it for you to decide to do the film?
Well, first of all, it was sent to my agent as a property. They were looking for at the time a young filmmaker that they could probably push around a little bit at the studios. Studio was a company called Lorimar, which was really much bigger in TV than it was in films, but they were kind of spreading out. And this was one of the ones that the owner's son picked to be his first producer job. So, and they were looking around for people, and I think the production designer, Ron Cobb, who did, we'll get into that, but did all the designs, including the character designs and things like that, and has a wonderful career that included Conan the Barbarian, Star Wars, Alien, and in terms of design. He saw my first film, Tag, The Assassination Game, knew me slightly, at least my name, from working on Dark Star with John Carpenter, which he designed as well. So he said, why don't you check into Nick Castle? They sent me the script, and I read it. I had many, many problems with what I was given. And I told my agent, I said, I don't know, I'm gonna go in and start from page one and go, this is wrong, here's what you do, here's what you do. And they're gonna look at me like I'm crazy. And he said, I don't care what you do, you should go in there, because this could be a nice stepping stone for your career. So he was really instrumental. My agent was Harry Upland, who was managing Scorsese and De Niro and people like that. So I went in and did exactly that. I had a meeting with Gary Adelson, the producer. I told him this is what I would do, and I was waiting for him to say thank you very much. Next, and he went, good, that sounds great. And I was suddenly on board a space opera with no real experience, in terms of doing anything. I mean, it was my second movie, and quite a challenge. But as you can find out, the team that they put around me, and some of the people that I knew that came on board were an excellent force in making the thing work as well as it has.
Well, there's an adjective when it comes to space operas like the Spielbergian. Everybody wants it to be Spielbergian. But it was interesting that you seized on the idea of it not being in sort of this, Spielbergian suburban community, but decided to go for the trailer park setting, which was a very interesting sort of pivot. Do you remember, can you tell us much about, sort of developing the script with Jonathan and where that came from for you?
Right. Jonathan, by the way, is Jonathan Betchewell, who wrote the original screenplay, and we worked quite a bit on it over the months preceding the production of the film. Where that came from, every turn, when you think about doing a kid grows up to be a starfighter that fights an intergalactic battle, you run right into George Lucas. And then in terms of sensibilities, Spielberg, of course, with all his fantasies, Close Encounters and E.T. and things like that, you run into Steven as well. So one of the things I wanted to make sure we did is, since we're running into them, and there's no way of getting around it, at least don't, go somewhere else, be somewhere else, because the original screenplay was in suburbia, just like E.T. or like Close Encounters. So that was, and that was perfect for those films. But I thought what was perfect for this film is an isolated kid. And where could that be? Where could we find an isolated situation where someone that wants to get out of there, and he really gets out of there in this case. So that was the inspiration.
Were there other changes that jumped out at you as you went through that first draft and you went in for the meeting at Lorimar, that you said these are some things that have to change? What were the biggest things other than the suburban versus the trailer park setting?
You know, and without going into specifics about scenes, and because there were a lot of changes, symbolically or metaphorically, I could say the difference was Jonathan wrote the characters as Skippy. The lead guy's name was Skippy, I think,
And Jiff.
and Molly, or something. Some names that were very cartoonish, and I went, this is exactly what we don't want to do with this. We want to ground it in a certain reality, because if you see the movie, if you know the movie, it is still broad. It's fun, it's broad, but he added more cartoony in its original conception. So that really changed a lot of things as we went along.
Lance, you would have passed if you had been Skippy, wouldn't you? Your agent would have said, "I'm not playing Skippy. I'm not doing this movie." So that was a good call.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I couldn't say.
So tell us, obviously what's interesting is you're sort of an earthbound Luke Skywalker, a lot less whiny than Luke.
And you don't want power converters.
But it's such a great hero's journey because you're reluctant at first, but then you do the right thing. Spoiler alert. So can you tell us a little bit about how the project came to you and getting involved initially with Last Starfighter?
Well, I was basically an unknown actor. I'd done probably 2 years of television work and a few small parts in films, and I had done Halloween 2. But I didn't necessarily think that was like any type of stepping stone or anything. I just was like, okay, well, I did this movie and see how it goes. So it just came to me from my agent, and it was called Centauri's Recruit. And I thought that was kind of a cool title. And I read it, and to me, what I connected with was like, what if this really happened? What would a normal person do in this situation? And because it's not really a fantasy when he's on Earth. When he's on Earth, it's all sort of a supposed reality. Trailer parks don't really look like that. They're a little rougher than that. But it's basically, what would a real human being do? And I thought it was incredibly funny that he reacts not necessarily like, oh great, I get to be in a, I get to fly a spaceship. It's more like, this will scare the crap out of me. It's like, I don't really know if I can do this, And to me, that was sort of inherently funny. So that's kind of how I read it, and it just kind of reminded me of like this new, what became like a hybrid comedy, science fiction, fantasy kind of film that was to be made in the 80s. There was a lot that you didn't see a lot of comedy in science fiction prior to that, and this sort of was a new son of a subgenre.
And what about you, Catherine? How did you get involved with the project?
Well, as far as I remember, because it was a long time ago, it started out as just a regular audition. I was auditioning all the time. I was sort of like a young ingenue in Hollywood. I was doing Days of Our Lives at the time. And I got this audition, read for it, and was called back. And I was partnered with Lance, which is sort of unusual, actually, to end up with the person that you have a call back with or whatever.
So it wasn't a chemistry read, it just you were...
No, it wasn't a Did they have chemistry readings back then? I don't know that they...
I think you're talking about the callback.
The callback, yeah. I don't remember that terminology back then. Let's see if they have chemistry, kind of a thing. I'm sure that...
We invented it.
We invented chemistry. But no, we got along really well. I seem to remember having some sort of improv kind of a situation where we were supposed to be at the lake, and what would you do at the lake? It wasn't like something out of the script. We were just supposed to improvise, and it was fun. And next thing I know, I was cast with Lance, which turned out great, I feel like.
And it was good no method acting. You didn't have to sit there and play arcade games for 3 hours, trying to be great at that game.
Yes.
And you had this terrific ensemble of actors that you got to work alongside. from Robert Preston. Obviously, you got to work with two versions of Lance.
I did, which was very exciting for me.
Lance and his twin brother Lance. And then also, of course, Dan O'Hurley is just terrific in the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all the characters in the trailer park were
Yeah.
quite well-known, really, character actors, and they
Barbara
were
Boston.
just. I mean, the reaction of the characters from the trailer park when it's screened, the reaction of the audience to the characters in the trailer, it's always like so fantastic. You know, when the thing lands and their reactions, and when he's playing the game and they're like, "What's going on?" You know, all this. They're just such terrific. All of them were such terrific actors.
Nick, you'll always see when people talk about this movie, it has this really unique place in film history, sort of following on Tron, but Tron has sort of a lot of traditional animation, even though it used computer graphics. I mean, you really use computer graphics for the first time, 30 minutes of computer graphics. Can you talk about sort of the decision to go in that direction versus miniatures and sort of the Star Wars, what had been the traditional way of doing visual effects for so long? This was at the forefront of what the modern era of CGI.
Yes, this is really a decision that was made a bit before I even came on. The producer, the person that I mentioned before, Gary Adelson, who was the son of the owner of the company, was looking to do two things with visual effects. One, find something cheap that he could present to the company to actually do the movie, because the actual budget of the picture was about $13 million, which wasn't a lot of money to do a visual effects type movie, and secondly, he was really very imaginative in terms of going, this is going to be the wave of the future if they can do this. And the big if was true. I mean, they had done some modeling, and they had done a couple of very low-resolution flights of things. This company, Digital Production, that it was eventually hired to do the movie. But there was no assurance that they could put together the kind of detail and the kind of time it would take to put in terms of research and development. You're doing a movie, think about this, you're doing a movie and you don't know, even when you're shooting the movie, if the visual effects are going to be any good. You just knew the drawings that Ron Cobb did and some artists, you knew they were beautiful, but you didn't know if they were going to be able to make that work, and it wasn't until the very end, and some of it didn't work if you know the movie pretty well. There's the landscapes, for instance, when they're flying through tunnels and going through mountains and stuff, that's very raw in terms of the detail that you needed to really make that seem real. But it was all really Gary Adelson and Lorimar that decided, let's give this a shot, And of course, once they did, I thought it was very exciting to be a part of that. I knew right at that point that this was going to be, in that sense, at least historical, as far as the film.
It's funny because you mentioned all of the scenes of the Gunstar flying through the tunnels and the landscapes, and one of the things that jumped out at me watching it very recently was just how ambitious those particular scenes were. So you weren't just trying to recreate the very locked down shots that you would get from a Star Trek film or even from a Star Wars film, frankly, at the time. You were trying to do something with the way that the ship interacted with its environment, with the way that it interacted with physics that was very different, culminating with, I think, the two most important words in the history of film, Death Blossom.
Yes, Death Blossom, if some of you don't know, was the final tactic used in the battle, which was the whole Gunstar becomes basically a gun in motion, and like a machine gun.
A 3D 365.
Yeah,
360
which
degree.
he had to actually have to do it. Well, he'll tell you that he had to be in the set model. And we actually spinned him around.
Did it turn his guts into a Gunstar?
Yeah,
or?
Exactly. But well, we did think that was some of the things that myself and Digital Production, Ron Cobb, and when we were designing it, doing the storyboards, going, okay, we don't have the encumbrance of physically having a model go through space and the camera tracking it frame by frame or whatever. And there's a lot of limitations there. Here you didn't have any limitations. So we would do all kinds of spins and gyrations and moves that would be near impossible with a model. So we were very conscious of that, but within the keeping, without going crazy, in keeping of the people's feel for what a real action movie would be.
Right. Obviously, you teed that up perfectly for Lance because, of course, seeing the exterior is one thing, but you're the one on the set who they're pivoting around and turning upside down. What was it like? And not seeing any of this because you have to imagine it. You're seeing Ron Cobb's designs. What was that like for you?
Well, if you look at that picture up there, you'll notice the expression on my face looks not quite as sanguine and friendly as I might be, because it was right after we did that.
Is it?
And yeah, my hair got all sweaty and my hair got all curly and stuff, and I was like, I was gonna throw up after the second. We only did it twice, but I was gonna throw up after the second one, and I was just like really pissed off. and it was like, and that's when they decided, okay, this will be the portrait picture. Well, here, go up there. We're gonna take your picture, and I'm like, really, you're gonna take the picture now? So it's.
I went to acting school for this.
No. I just like, whenever I see that picture, I remember exactly how I felt, and I think it's pretty clear in that picture how I felt.
That's pretty funny.
So anyways, but it was really fun because I'm spinning. It's like being on a roller coaster. That part of it is really fun. But it was, it had
It was the worst experience of your life.
take a bit of toll, but it was just funny.
And there's been talk over the years because obviously this is a movie that's beloved about sequels, remakes, things, because, and of course it was very confusing because Lorimar got sold to Warner Brothers, but Universal distributed, so how the chain of title works and everything. But we got to get Catherine to space. She gets on the ship, but we never see what happens.
Hello.
So can you tell us anything, or do you know anything about the status of? There's not one writer in Hollywood who at one point hasn't said, you know what, my chiropractor said that to me once. You know what movie they should really remake? That Last Starfighter. It's so great. And they remake all the bad ones, but this would be great. So can you tell us anything about the future of this movie?
Well, yeah, first of all, you're right. There's always been some interest in Starfighter. And of course, when it was released, actually released in '84, it didn't do the kind of business that would immediately throw it into that world of, we got to have a sequel because we have to make more money. But it wasn't until later on in the next decade that it became kind of a cult classic. People would discover it on video or on TV and recommend it to a friend. So it was really word of mouth that got it interested. And then the concept of it, and the theme of it, I think, were always clever, really clever. And so over the years, people have asked, to start it up. And really early in the 2000s, we were all together, almost 1 foot out the door, about to do a movie, a sequel, 30-year sequel. Now it's what, a 45-year sequel?
I'm near 40.
40.
And
Don't age us.
Yeah, to make a long story short, that fell apart because of rights issues, and that's some of the headaches you get with sometimes with projects. The rights have been reverted to the writer now, Jonathan Betchwell, very good close friend of mine, and the two of us right now are writing it. A studio's real interested in it, and it would be a sequel. And so these two would be the parents of another generation.
Named Skippy.
And that's all I could tell you at this point.
Well, that's more than we've heard in a long time.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's actual news. Write that down, Internet.
They better hurry or else we'll have to be the grandparents.
It'll be a late parenting. You know how they do that these
A lot of
Yeah,
adventures
yeah.
and then settle down.
Yeah.
But no, that's really exciting. And I got to imagine it was such a competitive summer with Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Star Trek 3 and Ghostbusters in '84. So, of course, you get this big film, and everyone's telling you it's going to be a huge hit, and it got to be heartbreaking when it comes out and it doesn't do what you hope, and then you kind of forget about it. And then over the years, I'm sure more and more people are coming up saying, you know what movie I really love that you did? The Last Starfighter. And now, here we are 40 years later. I know you just did a screening in LA, did conventions all the time, and people talk about this film. So it must be nice to sort of see how it has found an audience over the years.
Yeah, it was very strange. Hollywood sort of pretended like it, to me, and my experience, pretended like it didn't happen, like they didn't recognize it. But I would go to small towns. Like I have these friends that live up in Oregon, and I went to a football game, and it's a football stadium at a high school. And I walked in there, and everybody on one side of the stadium turned around and looked at me. And it was the weirdest expression. It was the weirdest feeling. Like, everybody in this town knows this movie now, and it's like I'm like a big deal, and sitting around this. It was a very weird experience because, like I said, Hollywood it was just like, oh yeah, you did that movie, it didn't make any money. What are you doing next? And
I feel like it really found its footing in the VHS market. A lot of people that I talk to at these conventions, and they talk about how they watched the VHS over and over and over again, sometimes after school if their parents were working or something like that. But it feels like that's where it really found its market, really touched a nerve for people. I think one of the beautiful things about it is it's relatable because it's about a young kid who's just trying to make a life for himself. And we all go through that struggle, especially at that time, going from high school into college. It's such a pivotal time in your life. And so it's very, very relatable. And then it has that extraordinary situation that happens to this ordinary kid. So it gives, it motivates kids, and for that generation that watched it on VHS, it just stuck with them in such a profound way. It's really quite incredible being here 40 years later, and the passion that the audience has for it is amazing.
And it's a great rebuttal to those parents who said, stop playing video games, it'll melt your mind. Because instead, you said, no, I'm going to save the universe because of this.
Right.
don't you understand?
Yeah.
So I think that also is part of the enduring appeal. It's just, it validates all these terrible decisions of playing video games all the time. And then, you just had this incredible success. What is some of the fun stories that you've had, people maybe you've encountered where they've come up and said, this movie is so meaningful to me, and things about the film that really touch people?
Yeah.
Well, there was a couple here that said they got married because they both liked this. They got together. There they are.
There they are. They met
purple-
online.
Count Chocula and Frankenberry over there.
That's right.
And I think that's just a wonderful story.
It's incredible.
Absolutely love that story.
Wasn't it that your wife had a poster or something like that online, one of the photos or something of the Last Starfighter? Is that how it worked? And he was like, I've got to meet her,
Soulmate.
And they literally said to us, you brought us together. They've been married 6 years. How much? 10 years, excuse me. And they have a kid, and you're welcome.
But
taking 10%.
And many people were, very inspired by, the writing, the Centauri saying, if that's all that's what you believe, that's all you'll ever be, and just this whole sort of, I don't know, it really touched people personally, and truthfully, like the whole reason I got into this is that movies touched me. Like the best movies that I've seen had a effect on me. It wasn't just like, oh, that's fun, oh, it's cool, oh, something that the movie said really, resonated with me. So I always wanted to be part of something that did that, and it's just really wonderful that people have experienced such a positive thing about it.
Well, I want to ask you, because Robert Preston was such a larger-than-life figure and, of course, immortalized in The Music Man, do you have any sort of recollections of working with him and what that was like on set for you? And, at the time, you were a very young actor, and he was sort of veteran of stage and screen. What was that intimidating?
Well, when I found out he was cast, I was like, oh, perfect. When I heard that, it was so, like, I wasn't really aware that it was actually written sort of kind of in a way for him, right? I mean, in a sense. When I found out he was going to be it, I was like, great, that's a problem solved. Or that's something that's it's just already going to work. And I mean, my stories are always about him being just such a good sport about rehearsing at 3 o'clock in the morning and going through it hundreds of times so that we could get the timing perfectly. We got every moment down, and because we were very limited, we had to move very quickly. The company was a TV company, and they were kind of used to, okay, we can get this in 3 shots, right? Or we can get this in 3 takes, right? And if it's more than 3 takes, it's not going to be more than 3 takes. So it's like, and so that was a tremendous amount of pressure. So in order to fix that, I would just be like, press, can we run through that? And he's always like, sure, kid. He'd light up his, 12th cigarette and come out there with his big head of hair, and he's like, all right, kid, let's go. And he was this very robust character, as you would expect.
Well, Nick, Lance talks a little bit about the limited shooting schedule, obviously a limited budget. So what were the challenges for you as a director? I mean, you had come back, you had a lot of experience, not only with TAG, but having worked on lower budget movies with Dark Star and obviously having co-written Escape from New York. What was, the challenges for you as the director? And because it's a very ambitious movie, but you didn't have a ton of shooting days.
Oh yeah, there wasn't a lot of, and I forget how many days. I think it was a 40-day shoot.
38.
38-day
initially.
shoot. And that included green screen, which was all the stuff that he had to be up getting sick in, when he's in the ship. And that was all experimental, by the way, too, because Digital Productions was going to do all of the green screen, and it was new to them. Again, the production was very quick. Well, as Lance is saying, we didn't have a lot of time. I mean, if we got a good take, we would move on. We wouldn't do a lot of coverage in that sense. The challenge for me was it was mitigated by the fact that I mentioned this before. I had Ron Cobb, who, if you guys don't know him, you got to look him up in terms of the history of film. Just a wonderful designer, understood. I mean, and when you look at the guns, is the person here that did the Gunstar? Yeah, there you are, right here. Wait a minute, hold this up.
Yeah, this 3D model of the Gunstar.
3D model of the Gunstar.
Approach the stage so we get it on the video they shoot.
Yeah.
Because and hold that up. That's
because he was telling me as he was doing this, showing me it, that how amazing it was that this thing actually would have worked. It was done with all the accoutrements of a real, someone that knew how a real jet flied and things like that.
Part just fell off.
That was, yeah, that was part of Ron's genius. He would start with reality and then find the whimsy in it, But that being said, the art director was James Bissell, who did E.T., and the score was done by Craig Safin, who's a tremendous, this is one of the best scores, I think, in the world. It's just a great score. If you look at it just factually and emotionally. So what I'm saying is that what mitigated the problems was I had such a great team that would, lift me up to be able to know what to do and how to do it and when. Like I said, I had no experience in this world, So my contribution, which came easy to me, was the things that I think are really fun in the movie, the charm of the movie, the trailer park, the comedy with beta units and things like that, and then developing characters like Grig and Centauri. Otherwise it wasn't too bad. You know, we had the first locations of the trailer park was the first thing we shot. So that was getting out all the daytime and nighttime stuff at the trailer park. And that felt very home-like to me. But when we got on the sets, that's where I thought it was very challenging. And trying to, with all the limitations, one of the limitations was you'll see a lot of these, the modern films that use digital work and have all this technology now. You can go into a shot like if he's in the Gunstar and move your camera around, you know, handheld. And the backgrounds that are like a space background or whatever it is, they'll track it and stuff like that. We couldn't do that. We had to lock down the camera and make sure that we weren't going to make the post-production people crazy. It's just a long-winded way to say that, you know, there were many limitations in terms of how to do this for the actual technology that we were hoping would work. So that was the real challenge.
And you couldn't do things like back then, set extensions. So you had to build like Space Command for the, it all has to be built. And I mean, that's an enormous set, and you know, you're not really able to enhance it at all. So, and to light that and to film that on a limited schedule, super challenging.
Very, very challenging.
Yeah. Lance, I know one of the things that people love, we talk about all the things that Nick brought, but also heart. And there's so much heart, and the relationship that you two have, and the relationship that he has as Beta. You got to play 2 roles. And I wonder if you can talk about sort of the approach to that, and then you guys had such great chemistry that I guess the test audiences responded so positively that in pickups you even added a little bit more of that.
Yeah, that's true. I guess what I think you're saying is that what is the difference between the, like, how would I play the different characters?
How do you approach it? And for Catherine, sort of your approach to those scenes, and also, you know, maybe you can talk about a little bit more of what was added, you know, late in the game as well.
Well, if the Beta was easier to do, because I mean, Alex, I just had to maintain the, not just, but I had to maintain the, what if this was real and you're not really a hero, and what a real person would do would be this. And, you know, I had to sort of maintain that perspective the whole time, which I thought was important. And then Beta is just blank. He's a blank slate, and he's totally confused from the get-go. You know, so that's what made for, he has no idea what world he's in, and he's just kind of winging it the whole time. And that was just fun because it was fairly instinctual. I didn't have to, there's no backstory for Beta. It's a blank, you know. So it's kind of like, you know, Starman was a character that, like John Carpenter's movie Starman, you know, that's a guy who has no, you know, history or anything like that. But this was obviously a comedy, so you just exploit as much as you can. You know, just like, you know, what would a Fish Out of Water be like? The extreme version of Fish Out of Water, and how absurd can we make it? So that was great fun. And then the added scenes were the lake, the driving in the truck, and him laughing out of context. It's a term my friend Ethan used about this girl we knew in college. She would just laugh out of context in the middle of a class, and that's what he does. He just laughs out of context, and everybody looks at him like, what's he doing? What else? We did the other.
We did the scene where the Beta unit was sort of developing, pulsating, that kind of thing. Where I walk in and I'm like, "You okay? Oh well, okay."
Oh, and taking the head off.
Oh, was that added as well?
That's right. And just him treating, like, the only thing Beta actually does know is how to remove parts of his body. You know, and he understands that he's a robot, and that's it. That's the only actual knowledge that he has that he has on her, because she has no idea. She's like, wait a minute, you're a what? You're a robot? You know. So
Did they add those scenes because you tested it and they wanted to see more Beta, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the scenes with Beta were working so well, and the relationships, and, you know, the quote unquote love scene at the lake.
Yeah.
All that stuff was working, and we really felt like once we got into space and we stayed there, it kind of it was just too heavy and lagged, even though there was humor there too. But we wanted to have more back and forth and cutbacks because we thought it would pace the picture better. And these were, these were from the standpoint of doing a test screening, these were tried and true scenes that we thought we could expand on.
Well, it was also a pretty good reminder of the stakes of the film by going back to the trailer park, by going back home and seeing everybody who was affected by what was going on. And it's interesting, Lance, that you mentioned being a fish out of water, because really you're playing two different fish in two different bowls of water.
That's true. That's true. That's true. That's very funny. But I think what Nick was talking about, it sort of cements what I think is a really important component of the film, is that it's still a real thing happening to a real person on real Earth. So if once you're up in space, you tend to forget about, okay, well, here we are. I'm in a thing, and now I got to fly it, and that's the only reality we have. And as long as you're cutting back to Beta in the trailer park, it keeps it based in a reality that is, to me, I've said it before, it's the basis of the comedy. So that's why that was a good idea to me.
Well, it also was planned out so that it didn't seem gratuitous, that we were just cutting back for some more jokes. So we kept the suspense going, because the idea that he was the last Starfighter was that it was a surprise, a tactic that they were using in order to fool the Kodan Armada, so that they think Alex is on the thing, and it's not until he's shot at the lake scene do they realize, wait a minute, this is a robot. We've got to get the information back to the code. And meanwhile, he's really up there waiting to attack them. So it helps to have that. In fact, that's something Jonathan Betchel and I are grappling with right now with the sequel, because of course Beta's going to be bad. In the sequel, and we want to maintain that same logic and reality to a need for that kind of plotting.
Well, it's such a great tonal balance, because you go from the fun of Beta, trying to seduce your kid to Maggie and totally failing, and then trying to overhear what the other guy is doing, and at the same time, being stalked by these aliens that want to, kill you. And it turns out it's such a great mix of tones, and it never becomes too jokey, and it never becomes too dark, and you straddle that line so well. Another movie that did that, we have to mention, 1984, 40 years ago, was Night of the Comet, which also tonally has this great mix of genres.
Love for Night of the Comet. Very good.
Thank you.
What's not to like? So I wonder if you can just share, a few thoughts about that, before, that movie, which is another movie that also has continued to find an audience that's beloved and is just so much fun.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities in a way, because both the movies are character-based, and the characters are relatable on a certain level. They're these ordinary people in extraordinary situations. I mean, Night of the Comet, I love it so much because it crosses so many weird, bizarre genres, from like sort of Valley Girl comedy to like horror to zombies to all these different things all in one movie, and somehow it all works out. And comedy, there's a lot of comedy in it as well. I mean, it's a classic 80s movie, but I feel like it has that sort of uniqueness in a way because of that. I mean, you can kind of compare it to lots of different sort of movies.
And for you, Lance, before we go to a few questions before we have to wrap up, Michael Caine famously said, "I've never seen Jaws: The Revenge, but I saw the house that it bought me." Yes. So I wonder if you have any thoughts about Jaws: The Revenge.
Well, I can tell you that I have this on a somewhat more modest scale. I have the same experience that Michael Caine has. That movie was supposed to go 10 weeks, and it went 5 months. So we did make more money, and I was able to buy a house myself. I didn't buy a,
Thanks, Jaws.
yeah. So I that was the good, very much the good thing that came out of that, and I'm still living in that same house. I love my house. I would never live anyplace else, and the funny thing about him is that he for him it was just a big vacation because his buddy Sean Connery used to live at Lyford Key, which is where we docked out of pretty much every day, and so he's just like, go hang out with Sean and drink and watch football or something, or play darts or what British people do. It's like, and drink. Anyway, so that's my Michael Caine story.
A lot of houses on that movie. Okay, so we only have time for a few questions, but if you want to line up over here at this microphone to ask some quick, a bunch of questions. Okay, here we go.
Let me just ask the audience one thing. Now, I'll still be here later today and tomorrow, and I want you guys to come up and give me your idea for who's going to be Centauri in the sequel. So it has to be someone current now. Poor Robert Preston is gone.
Tom
But
Cruise.
remember, he was a shapeshifter, so he could start as Preston maybe, and then go to, who is that guy? Who's the flim-flam guy of the 2024? So help me cast the movie. Okay, Nick.
Hi, this is for I guess probably Nick. Has there ever been any talk about revisiting the special effects in the original film and redoing them for a modern audience, much like Star Wars has done and Star Trek has done?
No, that I know of. I think because again it has a loving following, but I don't think anyone thinks that redoing the effects are worth their money and time to make a new version. I'd love to see that. Although some people, say, no, don't do that.
Correct.
Part of the fun of this movie, even though you might not have planned it that way, is that it kind of walks this fine line between reality and a game, So in some way, we kind of fell into a hybrid mode of expressing the space work and let it alone. It is what it is, and it's kind of fun that way.
It has film historical value that needs to be preserved.
Yeah.
But the sequel can have updated effects.
Oh, we'll definitely have update.
Thank you all for being here, first of all. So the question is more aimed toward Lance and Catherine. Nick has kind of talked about this as we've been going through, but film is such a gestaltic thing where it is production design, it's the acting, it's music, it's all these things coming together. With horror, with fantasy, with sci-fi, it's tough to see when you are in the middle of making these movies kind of what the end product is going to be, because you're not there yet. And we've talked about Star Wars a few times famously. They didn't have the effects. They didn't have the John Williams score. And at that moment, everybody was like, what is this piece of shit we're making? This movie in particular, like we mentioned, the Craig Safin score is great. The final effects in this are great, but y'all didn't have that in the moment. So how did you feel when you went to the first screening, premiere, saw the entire thing in full for the first time with all of those pieces assembled? What was your reaction?
To be fair, I wasn't really criticizing the effects as much I was criticizing myself. So to be honest, I was like, oh, okay, well that's what it looks like. That's what they said. They kind of said that it was going to kind of look like that, and all right, that's good. But I was mostly concerned with, am I landing my points? Am I making, So I felt like I could watch me. So that's
Which
why.
is a very actor response.
It is,
You're
it
still
is.
just
I mean-
kind of zoned in on like, all those moments where you wish you could have done something different.
I saw it, unfortunately, at like an ancient theater in Santa Fe, New Mexico that was sort of famous for being, it's a really old theater. And it's like, that's great from an architectural standpoint, but if you're seeing a movie with like cutting edge, sound and special effects, it's like, well, what's going on? It wasn't quite that good. But actually, no, I saw the premiere. The premiere was before that, so it was all kind of surreal. I mean, it was the first time I'd ever been like the lead of a movie, and it was kind of hard to remember most of what was going on. I thought it was good. I thought it was a good movie. I thought it was successful. I thought it did what we set out to do. You know, that's all I can remember. I've developed my ideas over the last 40 years. Over like, oh wow, yeah, that really is, you know, that worked this way, and this is how, you know. But I couldn't tell you the night that it happened. I couldn't tell you a very clear thing about the whole movie in general.
Just that like surreal fog of finally like, okay, this
Yeah.
is what it is. Yeah.
For me, it was. Oh, did you finish?
Yeah, I think so.
Sorry. For me, it was like one of the first things I'd ever done that I actually could sit back and enjoy. I don't know why exactly, but because normally as an actor, you just sit there and go, oh, you sort of cringe at all the stuff that you're doing. But I remember just sort of sitting there thinking, this is great. And one of the fun things for me in terms of special effects was like when the Gunstar lands in the trailer park. When we shot that, all they had were these legs of something sitting there and a giant fan. And we're in the desert, you know, it's just dust and dirt and dry. And there was a giant fan blowing dust and dirt in our faces. And Nick is like, just look up in that general area and it's a spaceship or something like that. And so for me, it was really fun to see the final product, you know? But yeah, I remember, I think I was a little confused by all the stuff that was going on in outer space, but I liked the stuff in the trailer park and all that.
And last question for this
Thank you.
gentleman.
Hi, I'm Ed. I have
Hi,
a
Ed.
question for Nick. The Dr. Strangelove voiceover gag, was that always in the script or was that added later? The which one? The Dr. Strangelove voice background gag where they basically imitate Major Kong's speech about the survival
Where
packet.
Brian goes, you will find.
Yeah.
Was that
Yeah, well, that was added in post-production, and actually we used the voice of the assistant director for that. His name was Brian Frankish, who was one of the producers of Field of Dreams later on in his career. No, a lot of that stuff was, you know, added in post-production and was not considered at the time. It wasn't in the script. So, but we had fun with some references and some little Easter egg kind of things.
Thank you.
I'm so grateful, Ashley and I are both so grateful to all of you for being here. We're so grateful for all of you. So great to spend some time with the Starfighters. And you can take a giant, as a tradition here at GalaxyCon / Nightmare Weekend, a giant group selfie. So they're going to stand here, and if you can just come around the stage, they can take a big picture, and then they'll be at their booth. So if you have more questions or we're too shy to ask something, they'll be there, and you can come and ask and get autographs and all kinds of good stuff. So thank you, Nick. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you,
Thank you, everyone.
Lance.